The sun hung heavy over Waco, Texas, baking the suburban streets in a shimmering haze. I gripped the steering wheel of my brand new car, the leather cool and firm under my fingers, and took a slow, deliberate breath. This was my moment, the culmination of years of late-night shifts, careful budgeting, and silent endurance. Nothing's more American than buying your first car and paying it off yourself, I reminded myself, the words echoing with both pride and defiance. Around me, the neighborhood hummed with the distant sound of sprinklers and the occasional barking dog. I drove slowly, feeling the hum of the tires on asphalt, savoring the independence that the car symbolized. Every curve of the dashboard, every glint of sunlight on the metallic paint felt like a small rebellion against the years I'd been overlooked. The quiet moments where my voice was dismissed or ignored. I thought of my family, the familiar pattern of my sister always getting what she wanted, of my contributions unnoticed, and I braced myself for what should have been a simple drive home. Then it happened. Melanie appeared at the end of the driveway, stepping into the street without warning, eyes fixed somewhere beyond me, as though my presence was invisible. The screech of tires, the sharp bend of metal, the acrid scent of burning rubber. It all collided in a heartbeat, sending shock through my chest. My hands went rigid on the wheel, the world narrowing to the twisted lines of the car as it shuddered and groaned under the impact. I froze, scanning for injuries, then the car, then her. The damage was immediate, undeniable, and yet I caught the familiar gleam in her eyes, careless, entitled, untouchable. Memories flashed, the countless times she dismissed my boundaries, shrugged off my feelings, and left me to pick up invisible pieces of myself. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes it's just heavier, I thought bitterly, the idiom tasting sharp on my tongue. Every nerve in my body screamed, but my brain refused to dissolve into chaos. Melanie stepped out of her vehicle, sunglasses perched haphazardly, gum snapping audibly as she flipped her hair back and smirked at me. "Dad won't blame me," she said casually, as if uttering a fact instead of a provocation. I felt my stomach twist, humiliation, rage, disbelief swirling together, but I kept my posture straight, hands steady. She was holding her phone loosely at her side, tapping it once as though documenting the scene for her amusement. My heart thumped against my ribs, a dull ache of suppressed fury. The echo of past injustices rang in my head, Dad always covering for her, my voice always fading into background noise. Yet in that moment, I forced myself to breathe, to observe, to catalog every detail, the smirk, the tilt of her head, the careless rhythm of her chewing. Knowledge, I reminded myself, was power. Do I scream? Do I cry? Or do I record this? My inner voice warred with itself as a neighbor appeared across the street, peeking over a fence with curiosity. The added scrutiny intensified the humiliation, but I remembered the advice my therapist had drilled into me. Pause, breathe, choose your response. I exhaled slowly, lifted my phone, and snapped a discreet photo of the wreck and her smug expression. A subtle victory, though small but necessary. Women and families are often taught to swallow disrespect to keep the peace, but my patience had a limit, and I was feeling the edge of it now. Images from my childhood flashed through my mind, birthdays overshadowed, family photos where I was cropped out, moments where Dad shielded Melanie from consequence while I stood invisible. This car, I realized, wasn't just metal and leather. It was a symbol of my autonomy, a tangible claim to the respect I had been denied. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, and the fault is mine, I reminded myself, linking the past and present in a bitter clarity. The crash wasn't just an accident, it was an echo of every slight, every dismissal, every time I'd been forced to swallow my voice. Gripping the steering wheel tighter, I whispered under my breath, "This ends differently this time." My fingers brushed against the cracked leather, grounding me in the present while I silently activated the recording feature on my phone. The decision was deliberate, calculated, proof that I wouldn't let another injustice go unnoticed. The air hung heavy around us, the suburban street now charged with tension, a silent battlefield where my intelligence and restraint would be my weapons. I knew I had to navigate this carefully, but my resolve was firm. I would not be invisible any longer. I walked back into the house that evening, my hands still tingling from the earlier shock, trying to make my steps look casual. The smell of roast beef and cornbread hit me first, warm and comforting, a scent that had always meant safety in my childhood. My father was setting the table, humming a tune as though nothing had happened, oblivious to the chaos outside in the driveway. The contrast between the wrecked car and the bright, cheerful dining room made my chest tighten. I paused at the doorway, pretending to smooth my hair, keeping my voice calm, waiting to see if anyone would mention the accident. Sometimes it's not the silence that hurts, it's who chooses it, I thought, already anticipating the familiar pattern. I hung my bag by the door, letting the air settle, bracing for the dinner I didn't know I was walking into. As I stepped fully inside, the decorations immediately caught my eye. Streamers and balloons, a small cake with "Congratulations, Melanie," written neatly in icing. A toast was being raised, and I froze for a moment as my father called Melanie the rock of this family, smiling proudly at her. My stomach sank. I hadn't been told about this celebration at all. It was as if I was just an invisible observer in my own home. Melanie's smug smile, perfectly poised, told me she had orchestrated this for days. I quietly sat down, noting the empty chair that had never been set for me, and swallowed my emotions. The room buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and laughter that felt foreign, as if I were standing outside a world I thought belonged to me. During dinner, Melanie launched into a story about how she had helped me get my new job, recounting my recent success as if she had guided every step. The truth was starkly different. I had spent countless nights updating my resume, prepping for interviews, and pushing through long hours alone. Yet here she was, taking credit while my father clapped along, believing her version without question. I opened my mouth to correct her, but she cut me off with a casual joke, redirecting the attention effortlessly. I felt a jolt of disbelief and fury ripple through me. I wasn't erased, I realized. I was rewritten. Some folks don't just steal your thunder, they teach others to believe it was never yours. That sting hit deep, and I pressed my lips together, refusing to let the tears or anger show. Memories from my past kept surfacing. The college essay incident, birthdays overshadowed, family photos where I had been cropped out, and Dad always defending Melanie. Each recollection compounded the weight of the moment. Keeping peace had cost me more than I'd realized, chipping away at my sense of self over the years. You grow up thinking one day you'll be seen for who you are. But what if the ones who were supposed to see you never looked? The thought settled over me like a heavy curtain, and I realized that my quiet endurance had limits I was now unwilling to ignore. Slowly, deliberately, I set down my fork and wiped my mouth, rising during the ongoing toast. I held my glass, looking directly at Melanie, letting my silence carry the weight of all my unspoken thoughts. I leaned toward her, close enough that my whisper cut through the background hum. "You wrecked more than my car today." She smiled without hesitation, a chilling ease in her demeanor. "And what are you going to do about it?" she replied, the challenge laced in her tone. My response was measured, calm, but unwavering. "Watch me." The room held its usual cheer. Unaware of the quiet storm brewing at the table, I knew this was just the beginning, that my patience and intellect would be my tools, and that I was already beginning to see where no one wanted me to dig. The evening felt charged with silent tension, every gesture and glance now loaded with new meaning. The family home seemed smaller, confining, yet it was here that I would quietly start reclaiming my voice piece by piece, moment by moment. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind circling the dinner like a storm. The quiet of the house pressed in, floorboards creaking under the weight of memories. The attic, long abandoned, whispered to me in the dark, a place I had barely entered since childhood. I remembered Mom's words. People hide things where they think no one will ever come looking. Something in me stirred. I grabbed a flashlight, careful not to wake anyone, my heart pounding with both dread and determination. This wasn't idle curiosity. I needed to reclaim the truth that had been twisted around me for years, and the attic might just hold it. The wooden ladder groaned as I climbed, each step a reminder of the times I'd been overlooked. At the top, dust motes floated in the narrow beam of the flashlight. My hands trembled as I pulled open an old, heavy box labeled Leroy, college, employment, etc. Inside, letters from universities I never received, job application feedback long ignored, photos with dates that contradicted Melanie's tales of helping me succeed. One sticky note in her unmistakable handwriting read, "Don't let him see this." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the fury of being deceived. It wasn't just about forgotten mail or mismanaged forms. It was a deliberate erasure of my achievements, a rewriting of my life. I remembered Dad on my graduation day, seemingly indifferent. Had he ever known the truth? I dug further, uncovering a small locked case tucked beneath a stack of old board games. Prying it open, I found printed emails where Melanie fed my father false narratives, framing me as unstable and unreliable. Dates stretched back years, a clear pattern of manipulation. Family financial documents revealed odd withdrawals under her signature, supposedly for my benefit, but clearly diverted for her advantage. I whispered into the darkness, "You built a version of me that made you look better." The weight of betrayal made the attic air thick, but I drew a slow breath. The greatest betrayal is rewriting someone's truth to protect your lie, I thought, feeling the sting of every stolen moment. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I began taking photos with my phone, documenting every document, every clue. A subtle sense of control replaced the helplessness I had long carried. I reflected on all the times I had thought silence was the safe choice. Perhaps it had been what broke me, rather than protected me. Confronting Melanie immediately might have been satisfying, but wisdom whispered patience. The power wasn't in the immediacy, it was in timing, in assembling every piece before making my move. The attic, heavy with dust and forgotten memories, was no longer just a relic of the past. It had become the starting point of reclaiming my story. Locking the attic behind me, I descended the ladder, each step carrying a renewed sense of purpose. Back in my room, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. A message from an unknown. Number read, "You're not the only one who knows." My eyes darted to the window. Melanie's car was gone, leaving only the quiet of the night outside. My mind raced. I had uncovered secrets no one wanted revealed, and now someone else had noticed. The sense of creeping empowerment swelled within me. I was no longer the passive observer of my own life. I would follow the trail, untangle the lies, and confront the truth hidden for so long. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready. It started with her car, parked outside a place she had sworn she hadn't visited in years, and I was determined to see how far her deception stretched. I returned to my room, heart still hammering, the weight of the attic's revelations pressing on me. I set my flashlight down and opened my laptop, transferring the photos and emails into neatly labeled folders. Each image, each document told a story of deception I hadn't fully comprehended before. The house around me was quiet, broken only by the hum of the AC and the faint creak of the floorboards, yet it felt charged with secrets waiting to be confronted. My mother's words echoed softly in my mind. "You deserve to know your own story." They stirred something in me, a sense of moral obligation intertwined with personal vengeance. I scrolled through the metadata and realized someone had tampered with the timestamps. Whoever did this wanted to erase traces of the truth. I squared my shoulders. I had to act, but I had to act wisely. Memories of Dad's old security system in the corner of the living room nudged me toward the next step. Dust-coated and overlooked for years, the system had long been a silent witness. I crept down the hall, careful not to alert anyone, and flipped open the console. Cables snaked across the floor, memory cards stacked haphazardly. My hands shook as I inserted a USB drive, copying every file I could find. The footage revealed Melanie in the garage earlier, moving objects with deliberate intent. My stomach tightened as I paused on a frame where Dad glanced toward the camera but quickly averted his eyes. It was as though he knew he was being watched, but chose silence over intervention. My internal voice whispered, "They knew it was watching. They hid behind silence." While reviewing the files, I stumbled upon a scanned letter from Mom, handwritten and dated years earlier, buried deep among old documents. Her words were a lifeline. She had always believed in me, even if my presence had been muted in the household. She had warned Melanie against twisting facts, cautioning that a house built on lies would eventually collapse. My fingers traced the inked lines as tears stung my eyes. The line that hit me hardest read, "You must come back for yourself before they bury your voice forever." It was a moral beacon amidst the wreckage of deception, a reminder that the love of someone who truly sees you can coexist with the cruelty of those who obscure it. I turned back to the camera footage with renewed focus. My pulse quickened as I watched Melanie place a forged envelope into my old desk drawer. In another frame, Dad's voice is audible off camera, quietly instructing her to make him look unstable. Faces blur, glances dart. A note exchanges hands. Every movement corroborated what I had begun to suspect. This wasn't a series of innocent misunderstandings, but a carefully orchestrated campaign to reshape my reality. I whispered to the empty room, "You thought I'd never see this." My hands moved quickly, backing up the files into multiple locations, each copy a safeguard against her continued manipulation. The sense of clarity was interrupted by footsteps behind me. Someone entered without knocking. My hand hovered instinctively over the playback button, ready to defend the fragile evidence I had gathered. A voice, calm but carrying a weight of command, spoke. "You shouldn't be looking at that." I froze. A silhouette filled the doorway, and in her hands was an object I hadn't anticipated, a tangible proof of her knowledge, her complicity, and perhaps her own fear. My pulse raced as I recognized the envelope trembling in her grip, knowing that what came next would irrevocably change everything. The first light of dawn filtered through the kitchen blinds, painting the counters in pale streaks. I brewed coffee, the aroma filling the quiet room, yet it couldn't soothe the tension coiling in my chest. Last night's discoveries hovered over me like shadows I couldn't escape. Melanie appeared, as if she owned the morning, strolling in casually, grabbing her cup, and settling at the table. She offered a smirk that didn't reach her eyes and said, "You always did love digging where you shouldn't." I didn't respond, letting her words hang, measuring her intent. Then she shifted tone, attempting something softer. "I was harsh yesterday. I shouldn't have snapped. You just took me by surprise." I recognized the performance, an attempt to regain control, a false offering of peace designed to confuse and manipulate. I kept my hands wrapped around the warmth of my cup, my silence a shield and a weapon all at once. Melanie slid an envelope across the table, her smile calculated. "I found this. It's Mom's. She probably wanted you to see it." I caught the falsity immediately. The handwriting was off, the language generic, void of my mother's characteristic warmth. It praised Melanie's strength and urged us to remain close as sisters. I remembered my mother's real words embedded deep in my memory. "Your truth is worth more than their comfort." I nodded politely, the gesture a mask for the tight grip I kept on the coffee mug, feeling every muscle tense. Inwardly, I scowled. She thought she could overwrite what I had already uncovered, replacing reality with her narrative. She underestimated the clarity I had gained and the resolve that now thrummed through me. I leaned back slightly, observing her with measured calm. "I think Mom left me something else too," I said, and her expression faltered. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the subtle warning of someone no longer startled by theatrics. I referenced timelines, receipts, and small details, enough to suggest knowledge without revealing everything. Emotionally, I had shifted. I wasn't reacting. I was calculating. Melanie's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Sometimes strength is how still you stay when someone expects you to break," I murmured quietly, letting the phrase linger between us. She shifted again, defensive now. "You've always wanted to make me the villain," she said, trying to regain footing, her words a mask for her growing awareness that control had slipped. I didn't escalate, didn't shout, didn't need to. "I'm not here to play games anymore. I'm here to make things right, even if that means blowing it all up," I stated, my tone even but unwavering. I placed a single camera screenshot on the table, not the worst one, just enough to convey that I was watching, that the power had shifted. Her eyes locked onto the image, recognition dawning. She no longer dictated the story. Stood and walked toward the back door, pausing to look out at the old swing set in the yard. Memories flickered. She had pushed me off that swing countless times, and I had cried. I didn't cry anymore. Strength was measured differently now. As I stepped into the backyard, the morning air crisp and clean, Melanie's voice called after me, edged with a hint of warning and desperation. "If you go down this road, you better be ready for what comes out." I didn't turn around. My gaze remained fixed on the yard, the swing set, and the sense of possibility that stretched beyond this moment. "I already opened the attic," I said, my voice steady, carrying the weight of everything I had uncovered and the determination that no longer feared her manipulations. I knew the next step awaited in the shadows of my father's drawer. A place long silent, long untouched, where secrets had been buried and the truth had waited for someone willing to confront it. That silence was about to be broken. The afternoon sun slanted through the living room blinds, casting long shadows across the floor as I organized the folder I had been collecting for weeks. Receipts, notes, small recordings, each a piece of proof against the web of lies that had woven itself around my life. My mind ran through every slight, every dismissal, from the car crash to the subtle favoritism that had followed me since childhood. Each document aligned perfectly, evidence of the patterns I had sensed for years. Melanie's manipulations were intricate, deliberate, but I was ready. I whispered to myself, steadying my shaking hands, "I won't be the silent one anymore." Phrases rehearsed in my mind, calculated, precise, preparing me for confrontation that would be controlled but unwavering. Melanie entered as if nothing had changed, chatting casually about errands and meetings, unaware of the quiet storm that had gathered in my mind. I let her words wash over me, then began referencing small infractions. almost teasing at their significance. She attempted to brush past, minimize, redirect, her charm a thin veil over the cracks of guilt I could detect. Micro-expressions gave her away, a twitch, a momentary hesitation, her hands curling briefly around a coffee mug. I pressed on carefully, stepping closer to the deeper points that mattered most. My voice remained calm even as I set the boundary. I need honesty. Anything less, and I step out. The tension thickened, our eyes locking, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken histories. I began exposing subtle inconsistencies, rearranged mail, unexplained charges, minor incidents no one had noticed. I didn't accuse, didn't shout. Instead, I planted doubt, a seed that unsettled her without a word. Her defensiveness surfaced immediately, the sharp edge in her tone cutting through the room. I observed quietly, noting every reaction, every vulnerability, all while maintaining control over my own rising anger. Patience became my tool, my strength measured not in volume, but in the stillness and focus I held. Power lies in patience, not in a scream. I reminded myself as her eyes darted nervously to objects she thought I hadn't noticed, proof of her unsteady position. When she stormed off, leaving the living room heavy with tension, I remained, breathing slowly, feeling relief tinged with the lingering fear that this was only the beginning. Alone, I reviewed my mental notes, planning the next strategic moves, reinforcing boundaries that had long been ignored. The lessons of my past, the patterns of favoritism, the unspoken rules of family hierarchy, all of it informed my next steps. Each calculated thought fortified me, transforming the quiet sufferer of yesterday into a measured, deliberate responder today. The path ahead demanded patience, intelligence, and restraint, and I was ready to wield each with precision. A subtle shift of focus brought my attention to the floor near the back door. A new envelope unmarked had been slipped beneath it. My pulse quickened, both cautious and curious. This could be another trap, another ploy to destabilize me, or it could be a revelation, a piece of the puzzle waiting to fall into place. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the paper, aware that opening it might change everything I had meticulously prepared for. Yet even in that hesitation, I felt the surge of necessity and determination pushing me forward. Whatever lay inside, I knew that I was no longer the one to be silenced, no longer the one to be manipulated. This was my first stand, and the lines had been drawn. Evening had settled over the house, shadows stretching across my study as I sat alone, reviewing the confrontations from the day. The first stand, the subtle retaliation, it all replayed in my mind like a silent film. Each exchange, each micro-expression, every calculated word weighed heavily. Frustration bubbled beneath my skin. Progress was slow, the stakes high, and every misstep could reveal more than I intended. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples, considering the balance between patience and immediate action. The air felt thick with anticipation, a tangible reminder that any wrong move might tip the delicate scales I had been meticulously measuring. My thoughts sharpened into strategy. How to escalate without losing credibility. How to make the next move count. While sifting through the documents again, my eye caught something I had overlooked before. A folder buried under old bills. A message I hadn't noticed. An overlooked piece that altered everything. The significance hit immediately. This evidence could expose Melanie's ongoing manipulations in a way nothing else could. Timing would be crucial. I imagined the perfect moment, calculating fallout, weighing risk against reward. A cautious hope stirred within me, mingled with residual anger at the years of deception. The realization settled in. I held the leverage that could finally shift the family dynamics in my favor. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with controlled anticipation. Then came the unexpected revelation. A confession from someone I had thought neutral, a secret laid bare that confirmed suspicions I had long harbored. I sat frozen for a moment, processing the truth, aligning it against everything I assumed I knew. Moral lines flashed in my mind: how to use this information responsibly, to right wrongs without compromising myself. Each detail strengthened my clarity, forming a picture of strategy that was no longer tentative, but resolute. Confidence crept in, subtle but undeniable, the knowledge that I now possessed a critical advantage. I considered every angle, every possible reaction, and the ethical responsibility that accompanied this newfound leverage. Preparation became my next step. I outlined the sequence of actions, rehearsing conversations and potential confrontations with Melanie and other family members. Evidence was organized, potential responses anticipated, and emotional reactions mapped with precision. My mind traced scenarios, best case, worst case, and all the unforeseen variables that had haunted my planning. Reflection revealed growth. I was no longer reactive. Intelligence, patience, and careful observation now guided every move. I considered silent allies, those who might support me quietly without drawing attention. Each thought reinforced my resolve. I am ready, and I will not be undermined again. A calm determination settled over me, a stark contrast to the anxious energy that had preceded it. A sudden vibration broke the stillness, a message, anonymous, appearing on my phone. I froze, staring at the screen, pulse quickening. Someone knew. Someone was aware of the steps I had been meticulously planning, the careful balance of patience and action I had cultivated. The unknown author of the text left me momentarily paralyzed, pondering who it could be, what information they held, and whether this intelligence was friend or foe. The realization hit. The game had changed. My mind raced through possibilities, weighing every prior move, and I felt the surge of both caution and anticipation. With the plan now in motion, retreat was no longer an option. The stage was set, the pieces aligned, and I was poised at the edge of change. Late afternoon sunlight spilled into the living room, casting long shadows across the furniture I had memorized since childhood. I took a deep breath, mentally running through the evidence I had gathered, the subtle maneuvers I'd rehearsed, and the conversations I might have. Every detail counted. One misstep, one misread glance could unravel the careful balance I had built. My chest tightened with anticipation, a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I reminded myself of the patience that had brought me here, tracing the long history of deception, favoritism, and silenced truths. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, carrying the faint scent of late summer, and inside, the house felt alive with quiet tension, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to unfold. I confronted Melanie directly, her casual demeanor betraying nothing as she perched on the edge of the sofa, arms crossed. "You've been busy," I said, keeping my tone even controlled. "And I've been watching." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, the first sign of recognition that I had prepared thoroughly. She tried to deflect, making light of past slights, twisting them into jokes. I countered calmly, referencing minor infractions and inconsistencies, testing her responses. Each micro-expression, tightened jaw, averted gaze, quickened breath, revealed the cracks in her performance. My words carefully asserted boundaries, leaving no room for her manipulations. "I need honesty. Anything less and I step out," I declared, voice firm but steady. The room held its breath as the first battle lines were drawn. Then came the strategic unveiling. I laid out the documents, the emails, and the photographs that traced a long history of deception and manipulation. Melanie's attempts at diversion faltered as the evidence spoke for itself. Each item exposed a new layer, altered timelines, false narratives, financial discrepancies, and careful attempts to rewrite my story. Family members shifted uncomfortably. Some stared in disbelief, others cast guilty glances, while a few, long silent, nodded subtly in my support. I maintained my composure, letting the materials do the talking. No raised voices, no overt accusations, just calm, undeniable facts. I could feel empowerment flowing through me, a quiet triumph in watching the truth emerge unaltered by emotion. As the confrontation reached its peak, I executed the final step I had carefully prepared. Each document was positioned, each narrative point reinforced, every defensive maneuver anticipated. I had made this confrontation legally and morally indisputable, avoiding impulsive retaliation that could undermine my position. Melanie's posture shifted, her control fractured as she realized the game was no longer hers to command. The family's energy shifted around us. Tension melted into reluctant acknowledgement, grudging respect, and a sense of justice finally taking root. I observed silently, noting each reaction, understanding that my patience, observation, and strategic thinking had paid off in full measure. The room, once a stage for lies, now reflected clarity. And then a subtle movement caught my attention. A figure at the edge of the room, someone I hadn't anticipated. Their expression was unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, hinting at secrets yet unrevealed. The pause was electric, a reminder that while one battle had been decisively won, the war still held unknown elements. My heart quickened, not from fear, but from the realization that every action now carried even greater weight. I held my stance, calm and observant, ready for whatever came next. The confrontation had shifted the balance, yet the final resolution remained uncertain, teasing the edges of revelation and the promise of closure. Evening settled over the Waco estate, casting long shadows across the familiar halls that had once held so many unspoken words. I watched my family's reactions to the confrontations unfold earlier. Some faces softened with recognition, others stiffened in reluctant acknowledgement. For the first time, I felt the weight of agency in my own hands, a subtle vindication that came not from revenge but from clarity and strategy. The tension that had built over years didn't evaporate entirely, but it had shifted, redistributed in ways that honored truth over deception. I reflected quietly on the journey that had brought me here, acknowledging the scars left behind, the betrayals endured, and the resilience cultivated. Even the smallest unresolved conflicts seemed manageable now, dwarfed by the larger victories that had finally allowed my voice to be heard. I considered the outcomes of the strategic moves I had taken. Melanie's manipulations had been exposed. Her narrative no longer carried unquestioned authority in the family. The evidence, presented with patience and care, had achieved what confrontation alone could not. The subtle leverage I had discovered earlier proved decisive. Timing and presentation mattered more than the loudest accusation. Family dynamics shifted. Whispers of recognition and quiet admiration filtered through the rooms, signaling acknowledgement of my competence and intelligence. Lessons learned from patience, observation, and measured action crystallized as I noted the ripple effects of justice applied thoughtfully. Satisfaction settled in, a sense of empowerment tempered by awareness that the path forward still demanded careful steps. Later, I engaged in conversations with those who had quietly supported me. Their words affirmed not only the truth of my experiences, but also the integrity with which I had acted. I revisited echoes of early struggles, the car incident, the silenced achievements, the empty chairs at family dinners, and realized how far I had come. The themes of forgiveness, resilience, and personal boundaries resonated more clearly now. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about ensuring it no longer dictated my present. Quotes I had long admired surfaced in my mind. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else is more important than fear. In these exchanges, I felt both closure and renewed strength, recognizing the blend of contentment and bittersweet nostalgia that accompanies true resolution. I turned my attention forward, considering the paths that lay ahead. Plans for personal growth, professional stability, and the careful reconstruction of family trust occupied my thoughts. The past no longer held power over my choices. I had learned to navigate it with discernment and intelligence. Minor uncertainties remained, as life always ensures, but I felt equipped to face them with clarity and confidence. My decision-making skills had matured, tempered by experience, observation, and the steady accumulation of knowledge. In this reflective quiet, hope took root, a sense that life, even with its complexities, could be approached with wisdom, resilience, and deliberate action. As night fully settled, I paused by the window, looking out at the property that had witnessed so much, aware that the battles fought and the truths uncovered had forged a stronger self. I internalized the victories while acknowledging the scars, embracing a new equilibrium where integrity and personal agency guided my choices. The weight of the past no longer held dominion over me. I was free, not in the sense that everything was perfect, but in the sense that I could finally choose my own path. The lessons, the confrontations, and the patience had all led to this moment, an enduring clarity, a quiet triumph, and the opportunity to move forward beyond the shadows that had lingered for far too long.